Welcome to the webinar on building an effective team. My name is Joel Rude. I am one of the consultants with Turning West. I've been with Turning West for about 3.5 years. And prior to that was a nonprofit executive director, and specifically in most of those 35 years in the camp and conference center arena. And I built a lot of teams, some of them around the seasonal, and also taught some of my staff to build their own teams within those settings. Karen, my colleague, has her own team building experience. Introduce yourself, would you please?
Hi, thanks for joining us. My name is Karen Chung. I'm an associate consultant at Turning West for 3 years now. I have a degree in hospitality management from Cal Poly Pomona. Go Cal Poly!
Yeah.
And have built many large and small teams for large venues all around LA. Did a few red carpet events all over. And thank you for joining the webinar today, Joel.
Okay. And just by way of a few more introductions and some housekeeping types of things, if you're not familiar with Turning West, we are an organization and leadership development consulting firm specializing in helping individuals, teams, and organizations get better at what they want to get better at: structure, systems, conflict resolution, executive coaching, strategic planning, a wide variety of topics and expertise. Today, we're focusing on how to build an effective team. But before we go into that, you'll see along the bottom of your screen there, hopefully you see that, a menu bar. Feel free to participate in the chat function, the Q&A function. We'll be doing Q&A at the end of our presentation. And Karen we'll be going back and forth with the content. Karen will be monitoring the chat and the Q&A time. So take your notes aside on the side or put them in the channel where everybody can see what you would like to share. Now, before we get off the title slide here, I just want to do a couple words of introduction to the content itself. We're calling it Building an Effective Team, and we want to emphasize building and effective. Now, building implies the use of tools and the knowledge of why and how to use them. Most building contractors, and my younger brother is one, have a variety of toolboxes with tools they go to for particular purposes. Some are used more often than others. After months and years of practice, some tools are used in kind of a second nature sort of way. But there's always a tool or two, even my brother will say this, that because he doesn't use it very often, he has to take additional time to set it up and prepare for it, the use of it. And today's webinar will focus on only a few tools. It'll focus a lot on the thinking about them and the mindsets around them within 3 essential toolkits. There are more than 3, but we're just going to focus on 3 of them. Here they are.
Right. So it's going to be team purpose and design, healthy and effective dynamics, and communication and learning.
Those are the 3 broad categories. We'll try to remember to tell you when we're switching from one to the other. Now, I think it's very important, as a guy who likes words, to agree on the meanings of words. And when we talk about teams, there's a wide variety of interpretations. So we're just going to read a couple. We're not going to read everything we're showing you, but we're going to read a couple of definitions here. This one's based on a lot of research that these 2 authors sifted through and combined into this definition. A team, which is what we're talking about today, is a small number of people with complementary skill sets who are committed to a common purpose, common performance goals, and common approaches for which they hold themselves mutually accountable. The emphasis there on common. It's about the team. It's not about the individuals on the team or the individual's responsibilities outside of the team. It's how to form a team where everybody on it is truly focused on the common stuff. Now, there are other ways to bring groups of people together and get stuff done. We've lumped them all into this. A work group is a manager-directed gathering of diverse people in diverse roles who share information and perspective on topics of mutual interest, not so much the commonly held definition, but there's a mutual interest and mutual concern. Then they focus on their individual purposes, goals, outcomes, and self-accountability. So it's in a work group, it's not about the work the group does together. It's about getting the resources you need, sharing resources and so forth, but then going back and doing whatever it is you do as an individual or with your other groups. Today, we're going to focus on building an effective team.
Okay. And what do we need? So we have basic human needs. We all have, and that's 3 questions here is, do I belong? Inclusion, right? And can I contribute? That's control. And does anyone care about me? Affection. I'll let you go into more detail on that, Joel.
All right, there's a lot of research out there on basic human needs, and most of it can be summarized into these 3 statements or similar statements. So just a little bit of scratching the surface on each one. Do I belong has to do with, will I make a difference here or not? Can I contribute has to do with, will that difference I make be helpful, or will it be a hindrance? Will it be harmful? And to what degree? And this one has to do with the relationships that I have. If I have any, will they help me feel important and feel of value to anyone or not? Now, we think this is important to building an effective team because teams are made up of humans, and teams develop a collective sense of themselves through these same filters that human beings use. That sense of self is played out through individual behaviors, which then in turn influence and affect team behaviors, both in the task areas and in the relationship areas. These are all related to a clear and substantive sense of purpose. Well, let's talk about that. Purpose deals with quality as well as quantity. Now, as we read through the things that are going to appear on the screen here, feel free to enter into the chat anything that you think is relevant to this, like what work gets done in your organization that requires a team to do it along this line. When you read this one, you've all encountered processes, information, duplication of tasks, etc., that end up proving to be redundant. And when you recognize something as redundant, what do you start thinking about it? How do you feel about it? If a team doesn't have a unique purpose that's clearly identified, it might be doing something that's already being done in the organization. And then people start recognizing the redundancy of it, and then what happens? So another body of research, analyzed by another set of researchers, came up with broad purpose categories. So every team has a unique, tight, specific purpose for existing, but broadly, you can categorize teams in this way. Process teams, like executive teams, management teams, teams that run the organization and never has an end. It had a beginning, but it really never ends. The team just keeps the process running, challenges the process, improves the process, but they're running the organization. Project teams have a beginning and they have an end, and they get it done. Hopefully, it helps the process along. And you can be on both teams, or process teams can take on a project, but then you just have to remind yourselves this is a project focus. And how do we define that so that we have clear expectations about what we're doing, and is it important? Does it belong? Will it make a difference, etc. And the third category is parallel teams. These are like task forces, usually a very short duration, and they augment the process or the project. So it could be a succession planning task force or a strategic planning task force, and it's comprised of whatever skill sets and temperaments and attitudes you need on them. This is not specifically a set of tools for defining a team purpose. We can help you with that later. This is more about helping you think about the fact that a team really should have a clear purpose if it wants to be effective. An effective team is clear about its values, its mission, and its vision, and it intentionally aligns them with the organization's values, mission, and vision. And if it's difficult to actually make that alignment happen, then you have those conversations. An effective team pays attention to how its beliefs and actions affect others in the organization, other systems in the organization, and how those things affect them. It understands it is not an island, but is really a part of a system of systems. We've encountered many teams that forget they're part of a broader system, and they get so frustrated with the other people because they've forgotten that it's their responsibility to seek information, share information, expand on information and communication. So here's a few thoughts on how to think about systems. And I'm going to tell you a couple stories about one of the camps that I started at as the associate director. It was a very, very dysfunctional organization. I eventually became the executive director. And these 4 points that are going to show up on the slide here, I will illustrate with a quick story each time. In this case, the outdoor education program manager and the marketing manager got together and created a brand new marketing plan for the outdoor education program. It was beautiful. It was well thought out. It was articulate. It was really, really good. And then the people in the registrar's office started getting phone calls that they could not answer because neither the marketing director or the program director thought to inform the front office where the registrars were that this set of information just got sent out and you can expect these kinds of questions and here's the information you need to provide the answers. So that particular parallel team, the two people that worked together on this thing, forgot they were part of a broader system and didn't inform the system that was actually going to make all their work successful. There was a gift shop manager at the same place who temperamentally just was she so valued the systems she had created that she actually refused, didn't just ignore, she refused to listen to the input from her team members and the customers. And customers being not just campers, but the leaders of the groups that brought the campers. And those leaders wanted a different kind of experience in this coffee shop, gift shop arena. And the team members were getting frustrated because they had good ideas, but weren't listened to. So it's really important to remember that as a team that works within systems, the systems are for the people, not the people for the systems. The board of this nonprofit really wanted to see improvements happen, remodeling of this, building of that. And they would place expectations on the facilities department without asking for input, disregarding that the facilities department had seasonal operating objectives that it needed to stay on top of for customer satisfaction, for staff needs, for safety issues. And that became a tug of war to help everybody in the broader system recognize that you can't just make a decision willy-nilly without regard to how the other systems will be affected. And Chocolate Cake ruled the facilities department's setting of priorities. They would set priorities, get projects lined up, but there was one manager with a lot of personal clout and charisma who, if that person needed something done, would offer chocolate cake or brownies or cookies in order to elevate the priority of her desired outcomes over the rest of the system. And we just decided that we needed to become more mature about how those things were decided. So these are all different ways of thinking about how your team is a system and interacts with other systems. It's also a suitable segue into the second theme of the webinar, which is this.
The Tuckman model. So the Tuckman model is 5 stages or 5 phases of team development. The first of them is the forming. This is where you're asking questions like, why am I here? And who's this person on my team? Storming is a little chaotic. It's the second stage, which is where you're starting to get things done. You're a little bit more assertive now. And you're asking questions like, what are we doing? And how are we going to go do it? Right? Once you figure all of those out, you're in the norming stage. The norming is who does what, where, and when. And the performing is the performing stage, which is the interdependence within the team. There's a certain level of trust now. and you're asking certain questions like, what should we stop doing? What should we continue doing? And what should we start doing? And that's just, now you're being more effective. And then the last stage is the adjourning stage, which is where all projects and teams, there's an ending to this, right? And the cycle starts again. You want to elaborate any more out of this model?
Sure. I've got story after story, but we're not here for storytelling. But one thing maybe two things I'd like to add to what Karen has said is that you have to go through the storming phase in order to arrive at agreed upon norms so that you can perform. A lot of organizations, and this happens in individual relationships, marriage relationships, if you don't go through that tunnel of chaos in the storming phase, you end up going back to this pseudo pleasant area of forming. But if you make it through the chaos of the storming phase, then you land on agreed upon norms and you can really get in the zone of performing. And not only is this a macro kind of cycle, this cycle happens at different stages within the macro cycle as projects change, as influences come and go. Wow. It's just a really helpful way to frame the understanding of this is such a dynamic thing. How can we understand this? Now, there's another model that we'd like to help you unpack a little bit when it comes to effective team dynamics. You might be familiar with this one from Patrick Lencioni and the Table Group, the 5 dysfunctions of a team. And they chose to take the more negative title for this because it really grabs people's attention. But other folks have, and the Lencioni team has already said, we've come up with some more positive language for this. So if those are the dysfunctions in this pyramid on the right, the stack of statements on the left are ways to address the absence of trust. You intentionally build it. You mine for conflict. You call for commitment as a result of working through the conflict. You figure out what healthy accountability is going to be like. And you look at results as a team for the team's results, not just individuals. We're just going to spend a couple more moments after this slide on trust, because if you're going to build anything, you need a solid foundation. That's what contractors rely on. If you're going to build an effective team, you need a solid foundation of trust. And so what does trust look like and where does it come from? But here's a question for you to consider, not just in the moment, but anytime you're looking at a resource for building an effective team, whether it's this one or another one. We have to practice these things. We don't just get good at them and stay there. You can become very good at any of these, but you have to constantly work at it. So sports teams, music groups, orchestras, performance groups, they all practice, they all rehearse, and they have refreshers. I was on the ski patrol at a mountain ski resort in Southern California for a while. And even the EMTs and those who made their living doing that kind of rescue work would have to go through the refresher at the beginning of the ski season. It requires practice. If you don't practice, you don't maintain that leading edge, sharp edge. And you give yourself permission to say, we're still getting better at this. Let's practice this. Let's actually use the language of practicing so we can grant each other grace and give each other feedback and so forth. So let's talk a little bit more about trust.
Okay. Psychological safety is a belief that one will not be punished or humiliated for speaking up with ideas, questions, concerns, or mistakes. This is Dr. Amy Edmondson of Harvard Business School definition. Psychological safety predicted team effectiveness better than any other variable. So think on a time when you wanted to say something in a meeting, but you decided not to. What stopped you from sharing? And then
a couple more factors around trust. Well, psychological safety is a belief. Beliefs are based on real experiences and how we interpret those experiences. So if you want to create psychological safety, this foundational thing to the foundation of trust. You have to give more than lip service to it. You have to demonstrate it, and it begins with the leader. If it's not modeled by the leader, people aren't really sure exactly what it's supposed to look like in your context. And we all know this next one. It builds slowly, but boy, it can disappear quickly, and then it has to be rebuilt again. And sometimes that's even more slow than the first time around. There are a lot of resources in the area of what trust looks like, how to build it, how to restore it. And that's something that you can put in the questions or talk to us later about.
Speaking of resources, we have one of our team members, Dr. Peggy Kendall, did a workshop just, I think, recently on psychological safety for one of our clients. And currently we're receiving a lot of positive feedback on how it helped the team and how effective they are. So that was a nice little thing.
Yeah, and sometimes unfamiliar language like this, if it is unfamiliar to you, once it's unpacked and discussed, it becomes this common language aspect of the team's culture. And that's one of the reasons that this found so much value in it. Our third section has to do with communication and learning. You can't be effective unless you're learning to be effective and getting better at it. And you can't really learn without communication. Whenever I would begin a group conversation or exercise on communication, I started with this quote at the top. Now, and then I would pause, and then it was in every group. Some people would chuckle, at kind of a knowing, understanding chuckle. Some would actually disagree with it, and others would take offense. But then that became a springboard for the conversation. To define communication and learning for the next couple of slides, we're going to say this. To communicate effectively is to arrive at a common understanding. Standing on common ground. The common ground can be expanded on and solidified more easily when there is some kind of mutual understanding. You haven't communicated unless everybody involved has some sort of common understanding. Learning, we like to say, is this, because think about the question that gets asked by parents or supervisors after something has gone well or not so well. They don't really ask the question, so what do you know as a result of going through that? Knowledge is not learning. There's a reason the question is, what did you learn from this? Or what did we learn from this? Integration of what is known demonstrates that something has actually been learned and reinforced.
All right, this here is a visual representation of effective communication process. And the sender usually will send a message through different channels, various channels. Those channels could be email, phone, chat, text, carrier pigeon. And during all this, there is certain noises, right? Certain distractions, certain things going on. And the receiver will receive the message, but will have to decode the message. Communication process is not complete until feedback is used. That's that common understanding that you just talked about, Joel, right?
Mm-hmm.
We make the mistake where the sender sent the message and we're like, okay, all done. And it is not effective communication.
And that just begins the process.
Right.
Even if I believe I've communicated everything I need to clearly to Karen, I can't assume that it's happened.
Correct.
I need to know from her that it's happened. Or if I'm facilitating a conversation between the two other people or having a conflict,
right,
I have to say, do you feel like that person understands you? If all I hear is, I understand that person, that doesn't mean the loop has closed.
And not even just in conflict. I think even in just talking to each other, I think Megan, our other team member, does a really great job of this. She will repeat back what I heard was, and then she'll repeat it and then ask for verification on that message.
Mm-hmm.
I think she does a really great job of that.
Yeah, she does. You will receive a copy of, or a link to the recording of this, and you'll also receive a copy of the slide deck in PDF form. And we would encourage you to use this graphic image to team members about communication, because we've encountered a lot of people who said, oh, that makes so much sense. I never thought about the fact that the encoding and the decoding is part of it. I never really thought about the noise. Then it's a great conversation is just to say, what is the noise that gets in the way of our effective communication? Sometimes it's in the team, sometimes it's in the organization, sometimes it's in our own heads or even our own hearts.
Yeah, definitely.
Useful.
Different definitions of things and whatnot. So a lot of ways it can go awry.
Right. Now, your organization has values and norms. Your team has values and norms. We highly encourage every organization and team to develop communication norms, because it's so important to getting the right work done well in the right way, etc. You all know that. So here's 4 subpoints under communication norms with a few comments about them. This includes emotional and relational factors, not just technical and logistical factors, communication norms. A little exercise that another organization developed and we borrow is called above the line behaviors. So you just create a horizontal line on a piece of paper or a digital piece of paper and list below the line, either bullet points or little images, every kind of attitude or behavior that is not helpful. That's a hindrance. Like, it's not my fault. That's not my job. That didn't really happen. So all those unhelpful attitudes and behaviors go below the line. Above the line is anything and everything that is acceptable, helpful, appreciated, desired. One organization simply has see the problem, own the problem, solve the problem, do the solution. So anything that fits up here is acceptable and helpful. Anything that is not lands below the line. And then the language in the team just becomes, what's above the line right now? I'm sorry, but you've just gone below the line. That's not helpful. Or, this is a really big thing. It's really frustrating. Let's give ourselves 10 minutes to go below the line, vent, but then let's grow up, be adults, and get above the line. So that's another helpful way to frame the attitudes and behaviors norms. It's also helpful to let people know this communication is just about conveying information, relative to this information is about bringing together everything we all know so we can make a better decision. Some people expect a converge conversation when all they're getting is convey. So if you can tell the difference up front, communicate the difference up front, you get the right kind of response, the most helpful response. There's going to be conflict. And usually conflict is that tension inside us between the difference of what is and what's desired. Mm-hmm. But it's really important for a team to put it out there, say what are our expected and approaches to conflict and what are not. And every toolbox has tools that we use the wrong way in the wrong time at times. The camps I used to work at, people would use scissors to open paint cans and it always broke the scissors. Sometimes the tool breaks the person. So take the time to understand what the right tool is for the job. We all know this, and sometimes many of us forget that email should never be used to discuss something that has high emotions attached or has high stakes involved. Far too easy to misconstrue and misunderstand. So here's 4 ways to categorize what you might be, to help you categorize the development of your own communication norms.
Okay. As we have accountability and feedback. And accountability is universally underdeveloped. And it's probably one of the most difficult to practice consistently.
And many organizations that work with organizations or do research will say, sorry, Karen, I forgot to put that up there. Will say that every organization says, we don't do this well. We don't know how to do this well. And a lot of it is lack of system, lack of structure. Some of it is just the lack of practice, or it's the internal tension that we don't want to deal with going into that storming aspect of things. So we encourage organizations and teams to consciously choose to develop a feedback culture, because accountability can't happen without clear communication. And you can't rely just on the quarterly or the semi-annual or the annual feedback, or not feedback, I'm sorry, the evaluation conversation to hold people accountable. So a feedback culture means it's happening in a timely fashion. And it also means that it's honest, direct, and respectful. If you're respectful, you can be more courageous about being honest and direct. But if you're holding back from being honest and direct, there's internal work to do and maybe some relational work to do. I was pointed out to me once that I had a tendency to manage other people's emotions. I would shape the feedback in a way that I thought would help them not be too hurt or upset or defensive or whatever, until somebody pointed out that doing that, Joel, is causing your feedback to be less clear, more muddy, and therefore less helpful.
Oh.
So these three adjectives really do help create a healthy feedback culture. And you can't hold people accountable unless expectations are clear. And that's not just a one-time conversation. So repeatedly clarify expectations. That doesn't mean just the manager, the supervisor, the overseer clarifying the expectations. It means everybody involved doing that communication process loop that Karen walked us through, and throughout the whole process or the project. And an expectation is valid if these four things exist around it. Are we conscious of the expectation?
Mm-hmm.
Is it a realistic expectation? Have we spoken to all the relevant parties about it? And is there agreement that it is a realistic expectation? Now, when it comes to people signing an employee agreement, there's times when they don't have much of a, what's the word I want, freedom to negotiate an expectation because it's in their job description or it's part of what's expected. And it's the manager's, supervisor's job to hold them to that. And you can refer to that in the conscious, realistic, spoken, agreed to sequence. It might simply be a reminder that, no, you did sign on for this, but let's work out the details of what that expectation looks and feels like to you.
Okay.
Now, that was a lot to cover in just a few minutes, but we're going to do a quick recap and ask you to think about some takeaways, and then we'll go to the Q&A. We wanted you to think about the clarity issue of team purpose. If a team doesn't know what its purpose is, it's going to make up a whole bunch of things, or its members tend to make up a whole bunch of things and go more like a pinball through the work together and through the organization than having a clear sense of direction. Life at work is kind of like bumper pool. It feels like pinball sometimes. We want it to be a bowling alley with a straight shot and avoid the gutters, but really it's more like bumper pool. Obstacles come and go, but sometimes we can learn how to navigate them. We wanted you to think about mindsets, because picking up the tool and applying the tool is a way to build an effective team, but you'll be much more effective if you're thinking about your thinking. Then we wanted to help you think about appropriate and timely use of the right tool for the right reason. Now we will go to Q&A. Karen, you've been watching that?
Been pretty quiet over here on chat and Q&A.
So nothing showing up. Does anyone
have any questions on the materials that we covered, content?
You can even ask us to scroll back to another slide and we can unpack that. And while you're thinking, this last line on this slide, you may have heard of Simon Sinek, an author and communicator. He has a talk on TED Talk and other places that he calls the golden circle. He didn't come up with this concept, but he's packaged it and delivers it really, really well. He says, begin with why, then move to how, then go to what. And most organizations and teams start with the what. What are we going to get done? What do we need to do? What are the tools, etc.? And that's where the chaos really begins and people start stumbling over priorities and value systems. But if you can go way back to the beginning, the purpose question, why? Why does this team exist? What is it going to do for the organization that can't be done without it? Then the value system and the norms, that's under the how. And then the real specific rubber meets the road kinds of stuff is the what.
All
The
right,
first-
we have a question in the Q&A. Can you give an example of how to develop a feedback culture?
All right.
Really
Yes.
good question, Susan.
Do you have one to start with, Karen, or do you want me to go?
Go ahead.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, what I would suggest is just to lay it out there, gather the people together, if it's an actual team or whomever you want to be part of shaping the culture, gather them together and say, I really think that we can build better relationships and get our work done more effectively, and whatever adjective you value, if we develop a feedback culture. Just lay it out there and say, I've never done this. I don't know what it's going to look like. We're going to figure it out together. And then start. Now, a book that we often recommend is called Thanks for the Feedback.
Mm-hmm.
I apologize. I do not remember the authors. It's written by two different people. But that book is really clear, very practical. So if you want an easy to grasp set of tools for developing a feedback culture, get the book, Thanks for the Feedback, and start there. And then you can also give us a call, and we've got additional resources.
Yeah, that's really good.
Buy-in, get buy-in too. Here's what I'd like us to do. What do you all think?
Yeah, normalize the practice of giving feedback, right? And that's good and bad feedback as well, right?
Yeah. And there's another book, a set of resources from an organization called Crucial Learning. The book is called Crucial Conversations. So if feedback is about really difficult scenarios, high emotions, high stakes, differing opinions, that resource helps you structure the conversation that is really difficult to have.
Thank you, Susan, for that question. Great question. Did that answer your question? Did that answer? And sorry, I'm getting used to this webinar. Okay. It's good to see you on here, Susan. Thank you.
Well, while other people are thinking about questions you may want to ask, we did not spend much time on the relationship side of team building. But that is, as I'm sure most of you know, a very, very important part of it. We did spend time on the trust aspect, and that's where the relationships get built. And the other factor that I would add to that then is time together, which is a little difficult when it comes to remote teams. But our team has figured out ways to spend time together even virtually. We're in California, Minnesota, Kansas, Washington State.
See.
And time together, creating common experiences about meaningful things, not the superficial kinds of stuff. Talking about what's important to you in life, what's important to you about this work that we do. It's not just about getting the work done and performance, even though maybe that's the expectation placed on you from external sources or sources above you. But the relationships are really, really, the relationships are the lubricant of the gears of getting stuff done. And if you don't keep the oil clean and fresh in your car, you're going to have problems, or wherever tangible materials rub against each other in mechanisms without proper lubrication, things overheat, things get fatigued. And if it really overheats, well, you know how that goes.
All right. Any other questions or comments even, or feedback? How about feedback?
I'll add one more to the relationship. This is both a task and a relationship thing. Celebration. is really important in teams, and not just generic celebration, but finding out through the relationships what's important and meaningful to the different members of the team. You may have been a part of celebrations where you go, well, this just kind of feels superficial and meaningless. It doesn't really connect with what I'm valuing. I'll show up because it's an expectation, or I do like the people. But doing celebration well is another one of those toolkits. So, we showed you 3 toolkits. The fourth one could be celebration, knowing what to celebrate, a timely way to celebrate. And it doesn't have to be big, rah kinds of stuff. But it's only meaningful if you spend the time getting to know each other and connecting individuals' values to the team's values, to the organization's sense of what's important. And not everybody likes to celebrate or can even think about how to do it well. So find the person on your team or the people on your team and make them the managers of hoopla for the team's celebrations.
Thank you for that, Joel. All right. So if there's no more questions, no more chat, I just want to thank everyone for spending the morning with us here talking about building effective team. Joel, do you have anything else before we end up?
Yeah, 2 other books that I think you would really enjoy.
Course you do.
One is called A Team of Teams, and it was written by the commanding officer in the Mideast during one of the phases of the War on Terror, which was a totally different approach to military action than the United States had ever done. And whether or not you are in favor of or against military action, the book focuses on how they had to create a team of teams out of all of these diverse agencies, multinational agencies, who had very different ways of thinking about things. And they figured out how to do the job well by communication was a key part of it. He had a plaque on his desk that said, "What do I know? Who else needs to know it? And have I told them?" That was his communication prompt on his own desk. A lot of valuable insights in the book, Team of Teams. And then the other one is about a captain of a submarine who turned around the worst performing submarine in the US Navy Pacific Fleet and became the top performing submarine in the fleet in 15 months. And it's called It's Your Ship. And it's all about how he went through the process of empowering the different people on the crew to not only rise up to their own individual responsibilities, but also to work together as a team to come up with better ways of doing the thing the Navy expected them to do. They did challenge the process. They did ask a lot of permission to do things differently. And the Navy gave them the permission because they said, well, you're the worst one out there, so what do you got to lose? It's an easy to read story, easy to read set of stories, and he brings the principles out that proved true in those 15 months very clearly. And then after his stint on the submarine was over, he began his own speaking tour and consulting to help people develop those mechanisms in their own systems. So It's Your Ship and Team of Teams.
Thank you for that, Joel. All right. So if there isn't any other questions, once again, I thank you for spending time with us this morning.
All right. Have a good day.